Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. We just want to do a big shout out to our sponsor, Construct AI, who are always pushing the boundaries, I think, with LLMs within the construction industry. And we are going to actually cover one of their new features later on in the episodes. But before we get into that, Yoshi, it's great to see you again. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. It always seems like one of us on holiday, and you've just come back from Iceland. But there was some quite big news last week actually to cover, I'd say.
Well, I was standing in Reykjavik Airport on my Twitter feed, or X, or whatever you call it now, looking at the big Tesla announcement, which I know we're going to cover. So, like we always say, that you can't rest in this world at the moment because there's too much happening.
I saw something on Twitter and someone or X, and someone posted, and it was a quote saying, "Oh, honey, I've had a really productive day. I got through my emails and got to 0 emails in my inbox." And then there was a picture of Elon Musk, right? And then it's got the SpaceX launch, it's got the humanoid robots at Tesla, it's got the autonomous driving cars, all within what, couple of days?
Yeah, I've seen that one as well. What did you do to it?
Yeah, what did you do to? Yeah, honestly, it's crazy.
Yeah, but it is all, love him or hate him, Mr. Musk, and we can talk a long time about his timelines as we get into the launch. What he does is he starts the discussion and he makes what was previously thought of as impossible as a talking point. So if that in itself is important, because it enables me to talk to people who maybe aren't in the tech world, to say, well, did you see what happened in the news today with the Optimus robot or with the Cybercab? And now you can have a conversation with them. Now they've seen it and they're okay, this isn't just James going on again about tech and AI. They can place it and they can say, okay, well, I can see that happening. I'm familiar with the Tesla. I can see where this is going now. So it is quite important whether you love him or hate him. We won't cover his politics and all that because I don't think there's any need to. But it's not the only story we're going to cover today. But let's start with that then. Let's start with the Tesla event, just for people who might have been on a holiday as well and weren't being as sad as me and checking their phones and might have said, what's happened? What has happened?
So last week, Tesla had their WeRobot event, and it was kind of a similar thing to iRobot. And it was what I would say is an unveiling, right? It wasn't a launch or anything, but it was an unveiling, and it was heavily focused on the wow factor. And so to a lot of lay people, it would seem that's amazing, right? You could see, 30 or so robots mingling amongst people, serving drinks and all these different things. They also showcase, autonomous vehicles in the Cybercab and the Robovan. In fact, looking at some of those, the Cybercab itself is a 2-seater autonomous vehicle, and it doesn't have steering wheels or pedals, which actually might be an issue for it in terms of regulation. But it's set to be under £30,000 and production before 2027. So that's the Cybercab. The Robovan itself they said it's a shuttle which transports 20 or so people, but there was no pricing or production date. So as you can see, like I'm mentioning, there wasn't a lot of detail, but it was focused on the wow factor. Now, that has divided public perception, right? Because investors and analysts alike who are actually interested in the pricing, are interested in understanding the business insights in some of these technologies, they haven't got it. They haven't got that detail, which leads them to kind of, there's a level of concern, or it must be overambitious. Yeah.
The Tesla stock price absolutely dropped, didn't it, after the event?
Yeah.
Because there wasn't enough, whilst you said the wow factor was there's not enough certainty. And the problem is when Musk says, we'll be in production by 2026 and then for sale for 2027, I don't think anyone believes that because he hasn't got the greatest track record. He does get there, but if you're an investor, that's too far in the future.
So it was an 8.8% or so something drop in Tesla stock I'm reading here, and it was wiping out $67 billion in value. So, but then he almost redeemed himself the day after with SpaceX, right? So there's things that are happening. But looking a bit deeper into driverless, what they call fully self-driving cars, or FSD now, he's looking to roll out unsupervised FSD in the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y. Now, what that means is, and it's really important to understand the difference here, because you have things like Waymo, which use LiDAR technology, right? And they have autonomous vehicles, but it's not quite fully self-driving cars, because with LiDAR, you have pre-mapping, right? So you have something which is pre-mapped. But what Tesla do, their technology is based solely on computer vision, right? It uses it's a camera-based system, which mimics human eyesight, which is awesome. I love that sort of stuff. I love when they biomimic humans. But this technology in itself is faster, it's simpler, cheaper, more scalable. But the issue with it is a single point of failure, because if the camera goes out or if there's windy conditions and the weather lighting is not great, it can really skew the vision that it has, and it can really impair performance. So there's
Yeah.
levels of safety concerns there. Whereas when you use LiDAR tech, there's a lot more resilience because you have the redundancy. So that's a really interesting insight.
And that's the big pushback I still get from people, which is, yes, it may be safer than a human driver, but do we allow a machine to make those decisions about, does it pile into a granny walking down the road instead of to a mother with a pushchair? And I think that's still unresolved. And I would have my doubts about getting in something like that. But I don't think it's going to stop this march towards the autonomous vehicle. And the fact that it doesn't have a steering wheel or any pedals, I found absolutely fascinating, because all of a sudden, this is more than just a vehicle. This becomes like a kind of cabin where you can do work or take calls and do things whilst you happen to be being transported from place A to place B. You're not sitting there ready to take over the steering wheel, because there isn't one.
Yeah, and one thing that I realized, I think kind of Musk learned this when he was trying to push X to be the one-stop shop all app, and was to incorporate AI, was that he realized he couldn't actually deploy a lot of his AI technology onto any hardware at the time, right? It was just Tesla. So you had the likes of Apple and OpenAI having their collaboration or their partnership, right? And Google have a very good software ecosystem itself. So this step now, you can start to see within a lot of the hardware, so the humanoid robots, the driverless vehicles, you're seeing it a lot more and more. And what you're getting now is, because so many people are using Tesla vehicles, you're getting real-time continuous learning, right? From the vehicles that are on the road. So it's not just within a lab space or a lab test. And we know that, right? There's a question around external validity in a lot of studies, right? You can do something in the lab, but does it translate to the real world? Sometimes no. But what they're doing now is they're actually using that intelligence they're getting from the camera's vision and training their model. So we should
if as well as paying huge amounts of money for a Tesla vehicle, you've effectively been helping them train their models to the point that they can now, bring something like the Cybercab out.
Yeah, and the thing that I really found interesting, right, was, if you can picture this, Elon Musk isn't just creating fully self-driving cars. He's creating a autonomous driving or travel ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because if you have your car, okay, you can run errands, you can drive for you while you're in the vehicle. You can also sit in your lounge and you can run errands and pick up people for you while you're sleeping, right, or something like that. It can then park itself and then have the AI humanoid robot clean the car.
Yeah,
so it's creating this autonomous ecosystem that's going beyond just driving. And he has this look for the bigger picture, which is what always seems to be in his favour.
Well, he talked about, but you can have a fleet of these cars, and whilst you sleep, they're out sort of. I mean, if you're Uber at the moment, you must be quaking in your boots a little bit, because they're going to have to compete with this. And how do you compete with the amount of money he's able to put into it? So, but let's talk about the Optima, because it wasn't the only thing. You had the Cybercab, you had the Cyber Van, and if that wasn't enough, and we've talked about this loads on the pod, is the humanoid robots. So he actually unveiled his Optimus robot, and we talked about how that's going to change, for instance, the landscape of the construction site. Now, when you see these robots at the party, pouring drinks, dancing, playing charades, all these kind of human things, there'll be a video in the newsletter that comes out, so you can check it out yourselves. It's amazing, right? And I know it's not the final thing. I know there's a little bit of human supervision going on at the moment once they train it, but this is the future, right? And this is the future of factories. This is the future of construction sites. This is the future of the manufacturing and the construction industry, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of using AI robots to deliver the labor force, I think is definitely going to be the step forward. One thing that they used the supervision for was the voice. So, and we've kind of echoed this, and I've kind of mentioned it a few times, is that we still don't know how to really converse with AI robots, right? Humanoid robots. This is why they're still remotely controlled by humans in that extent. So when they do have that capability, I wonder how that interaction will play out. But like I said, whether or not you look at this as a negative or a positive thing in this event, right? It wasn't a launch. It wasn't a deep dive. It was an unveiling to give you the wow factor. In 5 or 10 years' time, people are going to remember this event where they saw 30 robots. It was a human machine interactive event.
Yeah. What's been the reaction? Because I've showed it to a few people, and I've had two reactions from it. Like, one was like, "Wow, that's incredible," and then the other one, and I think more people did this, but I don't want to see it. I can't cope. I don't want to see it. Like, proper fear or head in the sand. Like, just take that away from me. Did you get any similar responses?
Yes. So most people were pleasantly surprised. They were impressed about what was happening. That's what I would say. But for me, I didn't really get the element of, uncanny valley, or people didn't like the robots. It was more so people concerned about the technical details. Like, are they pulling the wool over our eyes here? And is this actually authentic? Are we actually seeing AI capabilities on show, or is it pre-scripted? And
Yeah.
I think that, and because there was no technical details, even things like the induction charging in the vehicles, the app-based systems, they left a lot of that out, and I think that's what's caused the concern. It was too much on the wow factor and not enough into the actual translation into
But
detail.
I always say, in some respects, we're dealing on time frames here of decades. When we talk on Project Flux around how things are going to change, we're talking 5, 10, 15 years. So it's almost guaranteed he'll miss these time frames, right? He never gets them.
But we all do.
Yeah, we all do. But the thing is that it's irrelevant, isn't it? Because it will happen. I don't think there's anyone saying it's not going to happen. He's unveiled something that will probably be out. So if he's saying 26, 27, more likely 28, 29, right? But
I'll tell you what's
in the scheme
crazy,
of things, that doesn't matter.
I'll tell you what's really crazy. Do you remember that Sun article? And it said, I think it was people will be having sex with robots in 2025. And everyone was like, no chance, right? And it's still, but like, we're getting 2024, there's robots like walking about. The difference in terms of what I thought was capable back, a couple of years ago to now is insane.
And this is the way that the whole kind of landscape is moving. But I think it's important to temper it. So we cover both sides of the spectrum on Project Flux, don't we? So we've kind of talked about the WeRobot and how amazing and how exciting all it is. But there is another story where it brings us back down to earth a little bit, Yoshi, which is a study from Apple, where they're actually saying that these LLMs aren't as smart as we thought. So what's that all about?
So this was a shocking breakthrough, right? And actually, there was a paper released earlier this year which kind of showed some indication into data showing that LLMs can't actually reason, but it was overlooked. But this one kind of came about, and it kind of went a bit viral, had a few thousand likes on X. And just to frame this, so the way that a performance of a large language model is assessed is through benchmark question sets, right? And there's one called the GSM-8K, which is to do with mathematical reasoning.
Yeah.
Now, what these Apple researchers believed was that they think that there's been data contamination, and that when these models have been trained, using some of these benchmark question sets, the answers from the question set has seeped into the training data. So the LLMs are actually memorizing answers rather than actually solving these questions through logical reasoning.
Right. So these benchmark results aren't as good as we think.
Well, yeah. So this is what they did. So they took the question set, and all they did was made some slight variances in the questions. So if they changed the name of a few things, they changed the object in a few things, and they changed the numerical value. So let's say James had 8 apples. It might say Yoshi had 8 apples, or James had 10 apples. And what they actually saw was, when they did this, there was some significant drop-offs in performance. I'm talking the O1 model had a 17 or 18% drop-off, and this is the most advanced LLM that we currently have. The smaller models, which were a lot more like, I think it was like Mistral and a few of the more open source smaller models, had like a 40% drop off, which is a crazy drop in performance. It's very significant. And what this now does is it puts that logical reasoning under the spotlight, because OpenAI's roadmap said, look, we're going to get to agentic reasoning, right? Well, if these things can't reason, then there's a fundamental flaw with how they're being built.
Is it that, or is it because it's still a beta? Is it they've released it as a preview? Say the OpenAI model, they released it as a preview. It still needs a lot of work, and this is just part of the roadmap. This is just part of the learning curve that it's got to go through to understand there's a flaw there that I'm sure that they will correct.
Well, and there is the argument, that both humans and AI will have varied levels of performance when we introduce new context. If you're in an exam situation and the question is slightly more abstract, you will start to struggle with that question until you use your human level reasoning, right? But the AI performance was dropping off too easily. And I'll give you an example, right? So in terms of easy distraction, what the researchers did was they added seemingly irrelevant information into the question, right? And performance plummeted up to 65%. And here's an example. Oliver picks 44 kiwis on Friday. Then he picks 58 kiwis on Saturday. On Sunday, he picks double the number of kiwis he did on Friday, but 5 of them were a bit smaller than average. How many kiwis did Oliver have? Right. So you can calculate that. But the irrelevance is that it doesn't matter how big or small the kiwis were, right? There's still a number of kiwis. The model was including that in its operation, which was causing it to get things wrong. That is too easy to get wrong.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that most humans would inadvertently put into a prompt or into an instruction without thinking about it.
Exactly. So this is the important part now, right? So now when you're prompting AI models, you typically put a lot of information, and you don't realize how much filler or information which is irrelevant to what you're trying to get goes into that prompt, right? Because you think it can easily sort through this, right? It's trained on a lot of pattern matching data and all these different things. It can recognize these things quite well, and it can digest large volumes of data and spit out something which is quite reliable and valid typically. So now it goes back to the saying is you have to actually be a lot more cautious about what you're putting into these models and being very, very succinct and to the point in terms of what you're looking to get out. So there's that learning. But one thing I would also say is that this study was looking at mathematical reasoning. I don't typically use mathematical reasoning for ChatGPT. What I typically use is verbal reasoning and abstract reasoning. So there hasn't been any studies which has looked at verbal reasoning yet. But if there is a similarity in changing, some of the nuances or changing the variations of some of these sentences, is that going to change the output? If it does, then I think that's a bigger cause for concern, because I think most people use it for verbal reasoning.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this story for me is when you take it together with the first story we talked about, the Tesla event. So we're talking about these cabs and these robots, and the robots in particular are using LLMs as their interface. And we're basically saying that at the moment, and it is at the moment because these things are changing all the time, but at the moment, a very, very simple way that we communicate by putting a bit too much information in the wrong context could absolutely destroy the output and not give a correct output. So that's a worry, isn't it? Because then the whole premise of how those robots, the Optimus and what's the other one, the Figure 2, interact is flawed.
Yeah, it can be flawed, and obviously they use different AI models than just large language models, right? They have things like computer vision, object detection. So they've got this. It's multimodal in that sense. But the one thing that scares me, right, is that we've put a lot of effort in building AI within a certain way. When you typically refer to AI, you're typically thinking of deep learning, right, and neural networks. Now, Sam Altman recently made his blog, and he said the issue that we have with AI is computing power and scalability. These guys are now arguing no matter how much you scale these models, they're still fundamentally flawed because they aren't actually reasoning. What they're doing is they're pattern matching. So this creates an issue now, because we thought, there was the OL model which has a chain of thought, it can think. But some of these models were struggling with multi-step reasoning, because what happened is when you added complexity to a question, you appended a bit at the end, it was struggling with that. So now there's a need to identify how much of this train data has been contaminated, basically, and whether or not that extrapolates to verbal reasoning and how much that differs across different types of models.
Well, it's funny because there's another story that we picked up in the newsletter from Meta's Jan LeCun, who says, these worries about this existential threat about AI is absolute BS, he calls it. Because he says, actually, as you say, the models themselves will never become fully autonomous and fully kind of reasoning. But he does say that doesn't give up hope. There'll be something else that comes along. He still believes in AI and that it's going to become that super intelligence. He just doesn't think that the current kind of system that we've got with large language models, there's too many inherent flaws within it for that to become an existential threat, which I guess is also good, because we've sat here worrying about where this is all going to end. So if there is a actual kind of limit to what it can do, that'll give us a bit more time to work out how to deal with these threats as the next more kind of powerful models come out.
And it's also worth mentioning, right? Scientific method, as we know it today, is based on deduction, right?
Yeah.
So you actually try to falsify hypotheses as opposed to to actually support it, right? So they found a flaw, they look beyond it, they find a new means of trying to developing these models, and you take a new approach. So you're learning, right? It's better that it's been detected now than not. And again, this is just one study, right? If there's a meta-analysis showing different things, it can be improved. But one thing I would like to mention, I saw a YouTube comment, and it said that planes don't fly like birds, boats don't swim like fish, and LLMs don't reason like a human. Learn how to use AI to augment what you do, not automate the high-value activity that you do well. So it's very heavily focused on augmentation, right? Don't expect an AI or a robot to even behave how we do, because that's not how technology works.
Well, that's a really good point, isn't it? Because we do start to compare it to how a human would do things, and that not doing it like a human is not necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be that way. But yeah, all incredibly interesting. And then of course, we talked about the guy from Meta, but there's actually been a lot of awards and Nobel Prize awards over the
Yes.
course of the last week, all related to artificial intelligence, which again we cover. We haven't got time to go through it in loads of detail today, but well worth covering and reading that in the newsletter, because it's interesting to see how this is, like we keep saying, going into the mainstream, and now the Nobel Prize winners are all people who've had this kind of impact on artificial intelligence. Just, we're running out of time a bit before we get to the big feature. Just a kind of quick fire review of some of the other stories that people can find in the newsletter. So in terms of projects, what have you, there was quite a big story. Well, I thought it was interesting because we've talked about the power of Autodesk in the past, haven't we, Yoshi?
Mhm.
And now we hear that BuildDots, who again we've also covered, are starting to integrate their solution within Autodesk 360, which in itself, not a great shake in terms of a story, but I wanted to bring up because it kind of illustrates what we're talking about around more and more integration between these tools and the Autodesk ecosystem, which to me is a concern because that's given them more and more power and more ability to kind of own the space, if you like.
Yeah, so interoperability is a really important thing within construction, because people have a lot of companies, you're delivering projects, right? And there's so many stakeholders and companies involved, and you want to make sure that flow of data is consistent and you don't get a lot of noise, and you uphold the value of it. Centralizing within a big, massive player like Autodesk, and also I guess Bullets have a big market share themselves at this point now, it starts to create a monopoly. It depends how you look at that, really. I mean, yeah, it makes it a lot more difficult for small startups to get in and squeeze space because these guys are just going to eat up ground.
Well, it's the start of what I called the great consolidation, which will happen.
Yeah.
I think will start happening now. From where we've been at places like Digital Construction Week, you see all these startups. I think they'll all start. All the good ones will start inevitably buying each other out and being acquired, and this or integrating, like what's happening with BuildDocs and Autodesk. So I thought that was quite an interesting story.
But another thing just to mention there then is that if these companies do consolidate, like you mentioned, they converge, they then have much more leverage on the pricing point.
Yeah.
Which might make it. We're supposed to be making AI a lot more accessible, right? So, but if these guys have to monopolize and they do converge, they can set the pricing point, which could be a lot more expensive for smaller contractors and those who are trying to deliver smaller scale projects.
Well, it's the old Spotify or the Netflix model, isn't it? You come in cheap, you promise the world, and you totally disrupt the industry, and then you're the only player in town. You flick the switch, and the price goes up, and all the benefits goes. Talked about it a lot. Still, my big fear about what's going to happen within the project delivery profession, but I guess we have to see. Loads of other stories. In terms of events, we've got Project Hack happening at Rolls-Royce's headquarters on the 22nd and the 3rd, I think it is, of October. So that's next week. I think there's still tickets available. So anyone around who fancies one of the best hackathons in the industry at a really great location, Rolls-Royce's headquarters, then go to the newsletter, follow the link. And then the one more thing I wanted to cover, and this is kind of the last story, was the whole fallacy around AI detectors and how bad they are, and actually you can't do it. So there was a study done which they fed in the US Founding Fathers Declaration, the Declaration of the 13 States of America, and it came back as 97.75% generated by AI. Just to leave on that note, there is still a long way to go, because I know how many people use these AI checkers and are trying to get that percentage score down to 0. Well, forget it. It's not worth it, because I don't think those things are worth the paper they're written.
It moves too fast.
It moves too fast. It's almost it's like trying to sort of catch a jelly in between your hands, isn't it? It's impossible. But yeah, we covered that one in the one more thing. So that's it really from the big stories. Please do subscribe to the newsletter, find out a bit more. Oh no, there was one more thing I wanted to cover. We did promise we would, which was our fabulous sponsors, Construct AI, released a great new feature, didn't they? Which is the trending topics. So again, you can get hold of Construct AI for free. There's a free sort of level that you can sign up for, and it's very easy to sign up. You go to Construct AI .com, and you can sign in with your Google address. And the latest thing they've got is this trending topics in the last 24 hours. So what are people searching for, particularly around construction? It's really,
Exactly. That's
really
what I
cool.
like about it. It's you aren't just you're seeing trending topics, but you're also seeing what others in the industry are searching for. And I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. That's something that's specific within the construction industry. So I think that's great.
So what you do is, you kind of click on it. It says these are the trending topics in the last 24 hours. A bit like the Twitter thing. It says career development and construction, professional communication, sustainability. And then you can click on one, and then it will create a prompt for you. Like, tell me about the current trending topic, sustainability and construction. And then it would tell you about it. So it's really cool. Nice feature.
It's
Something you can do whilst you're having a cup of tea just to find out what's happening. So before we go on to the feature that we're going to cover this week, any last words from you, Yoshi?
Yes, one last thing from me for those who do use ChatGPT. Just try something out. Just try this prompt out, and it's kind of a bit more about introspection, really. So you can ask ChatGPT, and I'd say I recommend asking the O1 preview. From all our interactions, what is the one thing you can tell me about myself that I may not know about myself? And see if you're surprised at what you get back.
Well, I tried it and I got nothing, so it doesn't know me enough yet, even though I use it loads. Yeah, so let us know, actually. Let us know what you get. Send us a text or drop us a line. We'd be really, really interested to hear. Actually, we'll read some of them out if you can send them through to either me or Yoshi. The only other thing to mention is please do share this podcast and the newsletter to your contacts. And if you've got a minute, if only takes a second on your chosen podcast player, if you can please go and give us a 5-star rating and a good review. It just really helps the algorithm and enables more people to find out about this podcast, because we do this to really spread the word and help people kind of decipher what's happening in the world of AI in project delivery. So the more we get people kind of sharing, talking about it, giving good reviews, it just helps it reach more people. And that's what we want to do. That's the whole reason we do this. So if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want, so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
See you later, everyone.